Gil, I'm super excited to have you on this week's episode of the Silicon Valley podcast. Now, I've looked at your background, but for our audience out there, can you give a little bit of your career, your journey up into this point?
Absolutely. And thanks, Sean, for having me. Excited to be here. I'm Gil, one of the co-founders of Merge, which is a unified API for B2B companies. So we make it really easy for any platform to offer hundreds of integrations to their customers. I got to this place because I ran into this problem at my previous company. Started my career at LinkedIn, where I was a software developer, then ended up moving to a couple startups. And one of the startups was recruiting tech. I led the engineering team there. And we started to see this now modern problem of data is disparate. It exists in tons of systems. Everyone's applicant tracking system is separate from the platforms they use for recruiting. And I was just having to build integration after integration at this company with applicant tracking systems, Greenhouse, Lever, Workday, and ended up realizing this should not be something that every company is doing. Met with my co-founder, who I've known since freshman year of college. She was running into the same problem, and we decided to tackle this. And the rest is history. It's been about 4.5 years since we started Merge. We've grown quite a bit. We're now serving 13,000 customers around the world. We have offices in San Francisco, New York, and Berlin, and just continuing to grow the team daily.
So let's unpack a little bit what you said there. What was really interesting, you talked about you've known your co-founder since freshman year of college?
Yes, we met in an altered state during orientation, and just became best friends. And I think it was really a special friendship. I think because one, we just got along really well, but we also did a lot together too. So we were in student council together. Shanti was our class president. I was vice president senior year. So we were really involved, and we got to see each other working through tough challenges. We scheduled a wine tasting for 600 people in our class. They got 6 wines. We had somms on site. It was insane, for under $2,000, so less than $3, around $3 a person. So we've worked through some tough challenges together. We're both people who do what we say we're going to do. And I think for us, it was pretty clear that we wanted to do this together.
That's crazy. $3 a person with sommeliers.
We got sponsors. The local wine shops got to bring their logo. So they offered us wines at cost, and then they brought their people for free. It was great.
So so you worked together for all these years, it sounded like. Why was it this opportunity, the one that excited you to say, you know what, we're going to start a company together versus, why you're at LinkedIn or straight out of college then? Why not just start something there? Why was it this opportunity that had such a pull that you're like, you know what, this is going to be our company. This is the first avenue. This is what we're going to grow together.
Great question. So I think Shanti and I always knew we wanted to start a company, but we were never going to do it just to check that box. It had to be, a $100 billion TAM type of opportunity that was real. We wanted to build a legitimate VC-backed company. And I think over the years, so after school, we split ways. She did finance and ultimately ended up at a startup. And I went straight into tech. And so over the years, we talked through ideas. They would come up. Shanti generally was the finance mind there, who was like, that TAM is like $4. That is a terrible idea. But, I always floated things that were fun. But what was interesting about this one was it was large TAM, but it was also a visceral problem to both of us. For me, it was screaming fights with the CEO and with the head of sales. Like, we can't build more integrations. And them saying like, we're losing all this pipeline. And then with Shanti, she was on the business side. She was chief of staff to the CEO at Expanse, which is a cybersecurity company. And they had to integrate with all these different ticketing systems. She was seeing how much money they were spending. Like they paid this contracting firm 6 months to build an Asana integration, and they had to scrap the entire thing and start over. And so I think for us, it was 2 different angles, but the same problem of B2B companies need to build a ton of integrations these days. And just like you don't build your own, data centers, you shouldn't be building those integrations yourself.
Well, right there, you said this consulting group spent 6 months for an integration to Asana. What were the technical challenges that you guys faced then when you were starting off? Because I'm guessing you probably did not have anywhere near the resources that this consulting company had. What were some of the challenges you faced, and how'd you overcome them?
It's interesting. So we're in a space where we're competing against a lot of services businesses or in-house builds, and we're trying to create like a dev tool, an infra company out of it. And I think at first it was tough. People believed they should own it in-house, and I think that even just convincing them was hard. But I think once we kind of expressed how we build so quickly, which is through a combination of internal tooling, AI, a bunch of different things we use that help us map and complete most integrations in a couple of days. Um, Expressing that vision to our customers who just wanted tons of integrations. They didn't care how they got them. They needed a lot of integrations that had to be cost effective. And so the idea that, hey, Merge will come in and actually unblock you because you have a customer who wants integrations and you're not going to go build that out for them, but you have this vendor who will do it for you because they can do it so quickly. And I think that was a pretty unique value prop that people hadn't heard before.
So talk a little bit more about that. So Merge, are most of your sales team then distributors software, or is it in-house, or how do the customers find out or start using your product?
So we are, get on the phone, enterprise style sales motion, just because we're deep infrastructure. We're powering millions or hundreds of millions of rows of data movement for individual customers of ours. So it's not only a business decision and a product decision of how quickly it works and how does it solve our problems, but it is also it's a cost decision. It kind of touches every department, and so yeah, that kind of makes it really tough for an individual engineer to come in and say, I'm making this decision that impacts our support teams, our sales teams, all without bringing in the higher ups. Startups, yes, it's a PLG self-serve, come in, embed, merge, launch. But larger companies, they do want to understand how it all works. And so we are getting on calls with them.
And what kind of software categories do you integrate with? How do you decide where to integrate next? Tell us about that, your decision process.
So we integrate with a lot of different categories, and our goal is to tackle all B2B software categories. Right now, we cover accounting, ATS, CRM, HR, and payroll, file storage, and ticketing. So we have about 7 categories right now, and we're constantly adding more. So you can expect some really exciting ones from us in the deeper data space, some in more B2B SaaS tools this year. We're looking to launch 1 to 2 new categories at least this year, as well as a ton of new integrations and new use cases. So when you think about, accounting systems or ERP system, it's a broad category, and the types of integrations are very different. You have your spend management platforms. They want to sync every credit card transaction that gets created, right? So Ramp and Breck, they want to send all that across. But then you think about procurement platforms that really care about invoices or bills and reading and writing those PDFs or the associated data back and forth. But they're very different modules. So you can't just check the box and say, I have accounting integrations. It's how deep are your accounting integrations? Each accounting integration has 12 modules, and so really continuing to go deeper on the actual use cases as well.
Well, I guess, how do you decide what integrations or what your team should build out next? Is it basically customer feedback? Are you looking at the size of the market and saying, okay, there's such this opportunity if we go that direction, even though our current customers are asking for this? What's kind of the decision-making process?
So it's really a mix of TAM and customer feedback, what people are asking for. We do have a lot to consider: fragmentation of the space, willingness to pay. Is this ticketing where it's a nice feature to have, or is this accounting where customers are demanding it, and so you're willing to pay more for those integrations? Which market segments can purchase it? We want to sell really up market these days, but we also have a very broad customer base, and we want to support everyone. Does it help us upsell existing customers, or does it help us expand our TAM into new customers? It's honestly half a science and half, I would say, an educated guess of where we expect the space to go, where we think customers will be demanding integrations in the future. But yeah, one of the things we've had to do is say, how can we make launching a new category low lift so that we don't have to take massive risks to roll out potentially huge business areas?
And going back to, you're helping companies integrate, but I'm really curious right now, AI is the biggest buzzword ever. I don't know ever, but at least, it seems like, it was 2024 buzzword, probably 2025 buzzword. How does data impact AI? How does unlocking the data that some of these customers of yours have, how does that help enlighten us, educate us?
Yeah, Sean, I'm glad you asked that. It's number one top of mind for us. We have our AI Tiger team, we call it right now, running, because there's 2 different angles that we have AI impacting Merge. So one obviously is using it to build new integrations. That's cool. It's not perfect. It's not great. And the reasons are varied, right? Docs are not up to date. We have to reach out to their team and their team doesn't even know how the platform works. So these sorts of things that are like, if a human can't figure it out, it might be hard for AI. We're seeing a bit of that. But it definitely helps with a lot of the grunt work, the getting things set up, the basic operations. But the really exciting piece of AI for us is actually being a data provider for AI companies, because you're seeing everyone rise. You have the foundation model providers, and then you also have all of these associated businesses that are built on top, but they're all using the same models. And the only advantage that they have is the data that they're feeding into them. And so we're seeing more demand for integrations than ever. Notably, there's a few different categories of AI products, but one of the big ones that we're really excited about is this AI enterprise search use case or knowledge management search, where effectively businesses are using platforms like Guru, Glean, even OpenAI and Dropbox. Dropbox has Dash. There's so many of these platforms where essentially they read in data from your file storage system and your ticketing system and your payroll and HR system. And you can go in and ask anything. You can say like, which sales rep is the most tenured and has completed the most deals, and that these sorts of questions that are really powerful, but they need as much data as possible. So Merge is helping provide more integrations to each individual company than we've ever provided to companies before.
With that, I'm kind of curious, are you seeing that your customers, when they're unlocking this data, having value that they had no idea was even there?
I absolutely. I think that, the AI in general, when we've run it across data sets, like just open up ChatGPT, load up a data set, open an Excel spreadsheet and ask for insights, you're seeing some really powerful stuff. And you know that you can ask it any questions. So I think there's some net new data unlock, but I also think it's the accessibility of company information, of anything that's happened at a company for all employees. So an example here would be like, you can search and say, hey, I'm on a sales call. I'm actively on a sales call right now. Customer just brought up X competitor and said they're better at this. Boom, tell me more, enter. And it says, okay, I see from past Jira tickets, you actually already built that feature as well. Your team completed it. And according to this file in your storage system, it's actually a lie that your competitor doesn't actually do that. They just claim it, but we can see in this competitive sheet. So I think it's very powerful, more powerful than anything we've ever seen before.
And that is kind of crazy when you're thinking just going to the AI and it comes up with your rebuttal and everything in real time. I'm
Yeah.
also
So Guru actually was very famous for this. He's like sales battle cards that give you ways to go and fight back in a call. And now with AI, it's the coolest tool.
Now going to your team. One thing that I was really interested in when we talked before the interview, your team's always been in person, and not only that, it was kind of founded during the pandemic, where not only was it, everyone was virtual. No one even wanted to be within 6 feet of anyone, but yet they were in the office. Talk about the advantages and disadvantages and why you decide from day one to be an in-person team, especially at that time. I'm really curious.
Absolutely. So one disclaimer, we always obey the laws of COVID. So we started the company. It was me and my co-founder. We were kind of in a COVID bubble together. We're friends. We were just like, seeing each other. And we started Merge, and it was just us two in my apartment every day, and we would work. And then that was a few months. We decided to hire our first 2 engineers, and we had to get an office at that point. And the law at that point where we were was you had to be wearing a mask indoors. So we masked, we did all that, we followed. But more importantly is why we chose to do it in person. And that was purely the power of synchronous work, the power of being together and being able to move really quickly. And I kind of make this comparison of a college or a high school project versus a real business. And to explain that, it's like you're in a project, you're sitting there, you're building a web app, or, let's say a non-technical example, you're doing like an art project together. And it's like, I'm going to draw the outlines, you color it in. And you're talking back and forth, you're communicating, you're able to really quickly make progress. That synchronous work is huge. Same with the early days of Merge. Hey, Shensi, make me this endpoint. I'm going to connect to it. Like, okay, what do you want me to call the variable? It's just like ways that you don't develop at a real company, but you have to develop at a startup if you want to win, because you have to move fast. Versus as you grow, you start having committees that need to review any changes to the data models and a security review. And that's when work inherently becomes asynchronous. I think that's where remote work doesn't have as much of an impact on productivity. But while we're still small, while we're still shipping new features constantly every day, while we can go from inception of an idea to launch same day, we have to be in person because it just helps us move so much more quickly. It's a competitive advantage. It's not something we want to change.
Well, with that then, are some of the, maybe not your company, but other companies out there, would you recommend that over time they start allowing their team to work remote or only have these engineers always, no matter what, in person? And like, how would a company develop over time?
I think it just depends on what you're going for. I personally do think, there are cons to being in person. So the cons of being in person are you have a smaller talent pool, you have fewer people who are willing to come in. You also tend to have senior talent is even more limited. It's something we've seen a lot now. Senior talent wants remote work more than junior talent these days. And so I think it really hits your talent pool, and you have to make an educated decision. But my personal belief is most companies are not great at remote work, and some companies do it very well. And they're an example to the companies that want to learn and should learn from them. But I think overall, it's tough to do that unless you're at that 500 person mark or more, when you don't feel like a startup.
You mentioned junior talent, senior talent. What do you look for members of your team, especially in those technical roles?
So I think this is something that's really changed for me over time. But one, there is that technical bar. The algorithms questions, people, whatever you think about them, they're a check the box of like, can you do an algorithm? And also for me, people are like, hey, you didn't study that one thing. You shouldn't be penalized for that. And to me, it's also a show of hard work. It shows that someone wanted to prepare for this. They care about the opportunity and that they're willing to put in the time when they need to prepare for something. So I like an algorithms question, but I don't think that's number one. To me, it's how much they care, how much they love what they do, and they care about the opportunity that's coming up.
Well, with that, with people that care, and going back to the very beginning, I mean, you founded this company with your best or close friend or best friend from college. Where do you draw the line between friendship and colleague or work? Or, I mean, because that's an interesting dance there. So I'm kind of curious, how do you balance that so you're not just yelling and screaming and setting boundaries? Like, how do you do it?
I feel like it's almost like parenthood. It's like, how do you balance having fun with your kid with, making sure that they're being raised correctly? And I think it applies to Merge heavily. We generally just have to take things really, really seriously. We kind of think of friend time as time that's outside of the office. If we're, going to grab a drink, occasionally we'll travel together. Like those are our friend times. Or we'll do a workout class in the city. But otherwise we're all business. Like we're pretty serious. And for us, we want to win. That means we don't have time to really mess around.
Then how do you recommend it for another founder out there? They're just starting their business. They might not have that much capital to hire people. So it is a group of friends that are building this. How would you recommend them to set boundaries, or for them to, from your experience, best practices?
Yeah. I mean, I think with an office, it becomes a lot easier, right? It's like when we're in the office, we're all work. We crack jokes, obviously, but we're all work focused. And then when we're outside the office, we can do whatever. I think that would be the easiest. If you're not in an office, maybe setting like daily hours of, hey, these are our times for serious work.
Good advice. Good advice. Okay. Now back to the company and kind of the growth and the projections and that. As the company's growing, how are you thinking about hitting financial metrics versus hitting growth metrics?
Yeah. So it's a tough question. I think growth metrics obviously are very important. You have to decide, are you going to go for your next fundraise, and how are we going to look on paper when we go for that? Versus, thinking about these days, you're seeing a lot more of a focus on efficiency. Don't grow as fast, but do it efficiently. So that's really, I think, to me, what we're seeing in the market these days is everyone kind of demanding efficient growth, not necessarily like growth at all costs. So yeah, we're focusing on that. There's a few ways we're going about it, really just doubling down on enterprise and upmarket, which has naturally across all businesses, higher NDR generally. And then, just continuing to build out the products that they need. Also, jumping on the AI wave is really important for us. A lot of these AI companies are growing faster than ever. And when our customers grow, we grow. And so we want to really invest in the fast growth.
That's interesting. So with the growth or for the efficiency versus growth at all costs, how are those conversations with investors, with deploying capital? How are those conversations internally with the team where they might go, this is a shiny thing over here. Let's go all out for it. And versus okay, there's a shiny thing over there, but here are some low hanging fruit. Let's aim for that. And then we'll get there. How are those internal conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both, right? So Merge is still growing really fast, and so we don't want to dampen the fire. So we do have to balance, and I think what it means is the initiatives that are incredibly risky and probably have low returns but have a shot. Now is not the best time to be doing those when capital is expensive. Versus right now, we actually have a few business lines that are several business lines are all growing very fast right now. If we put more resources on them, it's very easy for us to calculate and see just like, wow, that's gonna really fuel the fire. So it took a big exercise of taking a step back, looking at the whole business and seeing, like what are the areas of growth. Enterprise is really important to us. All of our categories are really important to us. And then kind of, picking the right areas.
I'm kind of curious when creating financial forecasts, financial models for the future. Do you do a lot of different scenarios of, okay, if capital becomes cheap, this is what it looks like. Capital's expensive. This is the direction we're going to go in. Capital, base case, how many different scenarios as this founder do you think out, and how does that change at each stage of the company's growth?
I think we try not to pin too hard on like cost of capital. It's an important variable, but I think we try to pin on the things that we can control. So we do multiple models, but it's more on like, what are the potential outcomes for Merge? Like what if we underperform target, hit target, exceed target? How are we going to handle this? And then constantly reevaluate that. But I think we just don't want to bank too much on capital becoming cheaper, because I think it's a dangerous road. One, then we become dependent on that happening. And then two, then we just purely always think about capital, fundraise, when our goal is to make a profitable business.
That's great. And next year, what are some of the challenges you think you might face or anticipating facing? And what are the plans to kind of overcome those or address them?
So I think everyone is talking about AI right now, and AI is a threat to SaaS, which is interesting. Merge is not quite. We have some SaaS aspects, but we're really more of like an infra dev tools company. We help with data movement. So for me, I think watching AI is really important, but taking advantage of it is what we're going to have to do. We already use some AI to help with mapping data models, but namely, it's pretty manual. We're not, and we don't touch any customer data with AI. So continuing to just see what we can do to help us move more quickly is going to be really important. But notably, I think also watching the market, watching what's going on with these AI companies and how they're impacting, and making sure that we can stay that picks and shovels business that we've started to become, where we are just a supplier of data for all of these AI companies.
Talk about that kind of dance or that ecosystem of SaaS and AI, and what are founders and business owners that were a SaaS company or AI? What are the internal kind of dialogue amongst each other with? Because you mentioned right there, AI sounds like it's killing SaaS, or at least that's kind of the mindset. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing these agents get really powerful and be able to take on a lot of actions that you normally would go to a SaaS platform for. And so the question is like, does SaaS stay in its current state, which we know is not going to happen? Does it go to the level of sprinkling in AI across the board where you can take certain actions? I think we've seen a mix there where people are like, well, you don't need AI you don't need to ask it to change it to dark mode if a button is better served to solve that. I don't think everything's going to be like prompt based. But AI is going to certainly impact how distributed people are. Can big platforms and mono platforms now start to form potentially that are good at everything because you're using AI to power a lot of it? AI talks to all the databases, and there's no real hand coded logic anymore. It's all kind of done by an AI agent. So it's really tough. It remains to be seen. But I think what we do know is that SaaS is going to be impacted. You're going to see more of these larger companies coming up, and you're going to see more demand for customer data than ever.
And then through this journey of build and merge and to the point today, what are some of been the experiences, the lessons learned on that journey so far?
I've learned a lot. I think one of the big ones I will always kind of keep close to my heart now is it's going to come off weird, but it's how to judge people. It's how to interview, how to understand someone's motivations and who they are as a person. And I think like for better or for worse, I tended to be really optimistic about everybody. I really held everyone in high regards, and someone could do something really bad to me, and I'm like, they're just having a bad day. And I think I've become very good at picking up people's true colors, and through that, understanding why it's so important to hire the right people who care, who when in aggregate, when one-on-one in an interview may come off as, oh, they slipped up, but when in aggregate, you have a room full of jerks. So I think for me, it's again, like hire people who care, bring the people around you who are going to build in the way that you want to build. And then you're going to build a successful company by continuing to just make sure no matter what, no matter who pushes against you, you fight for what you believe is the right team to build.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that aggregate, the one person bad out, but aggregate, now you have a room full of jerks.
Yeah.
Have you seen has there been any times where you've just had to go, okay, we're taking this group and you're no longer with the team, or have there been any major headaches like that on the road before you came to that lesson?
So not at Merge. I think we've been really good about sticking to it. I think there have been a few mistakes, people who me or other people just didn't do a deep enough interview, or someone was a really good interviewer and managed to slip by. But I think overall we've been relatively good about it. That being said, I've been on a team in the past that was like that and should have been. Everyone on the team should have been fired. It was so unhealthy for the company. And it's hard in tech. No one wants to fire a team that is outputting, but I think it's also important to look at the second order effects of their behavior on everyone else, the other teams around them, on just all of that. And it's not just jerks, right? Like that's not necessarily. It's not just people who are not respectful to each other. People who don't care, people who are lazy, people who insist that they have to build things their way or the highway. Push for personal goals over business goals. You see all of it.
Oh, that's fantastic. And then wrapping it up, for say someone gets through the interview process and that they're on the team, how do you go about deciding KPIs, key performance indicators? What do you consider most critical to measure for people's performance?
Yeah, we output is number one for us. I think it's a few things. So output is always going to be number one, but we feel it's really important that people become owners and they get trusted as a source of something, right? So if you are a go-to for people, you're in a good position. You should make yourself very knowledgeable about a lot of areas of our code base or of the product or how the questions our customers are asking. And then from there, identify areas to build. You're not just an owner of the features that you've been asked to build, but you're an owner of the business, and you have to treat it that way. You have to say, I identified an area where I can really level up Merge as a whole.
Gil, what's an exciting thing that someone has used your platform for, something that you did not expect?
I can actually name a couple. So I'll start with AI because we were just on that topic. And we didn't expect it because AI just wasn't good when we started Merge. But I think it's powering these models. I gave the example of this enterprise search and how people are using that. That's been really exciting. But a different one that's cool in the enterprise space, but not as much in the AI space, is expense management and sort of like bill tracking platforms. So they're using many categories, but namely HR and payroll and accounting are the three main ones. So in invoicing, billing, contracts, all of that, they're two-way syncing invoices with NetSuite and QuickBooks. It's used by procurement companies, expense management. That's been really cool because it's just massive volumes of data being moved across and accessing APIs that we had to build really intense internal NetSuite suite apps and just things to be able to control. And so I think for us, like the time that we invested in and seeing the outcomes has been awesome. And then maybe one other one, and then I'll stop on the examples. But security platforms, they've been using HR. They use our ticketing integrations. They want to track when employees are coming and going, what platforms they have access to, revoke access if they leave, but also if they detect bad access or they detect any other security issue, open a ticketing system issue, open something in Asana or Jira and assign that to the security team so that they know they need to go tackle that right away.
Oh, that's fantastic. And Gil, if anyone wants to find out more about yourself, what you're working on, what's the best way to go about doing that?
Absolutely. They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Gil Feig, Feig, or feel free to check out our website, merge.dev. That's merge.dev.
Fantastic. And for our audience out there, well, I'm not the host of the Silicon Valley podcast. I'm an investment banker focused on mergers, acquisitions, growth capital. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Earlier, the better. And for our audience out there, thank you. And check out the Silicon Valley podcast.com. And Gil, I want to thank you for taking the time to be on this week's episode of the Silicon Valley podcast.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate it.